Ambassador Vexthar had seen many peculiar things in his 70 cycles serving the Galactic Council, but nothing had prepared him for humanity's arrival at Station Kepler 442. The human delegation's ship docked at Port 7, and Vexthar adjusted his ceremonial sash nervously. Humans were classified as apex predators, death-worlders from a planet so hostile that merely reading the environmental reports made his scales itch. High gravity, extreme temperature fluctuations, an atmosphere that corroded most metals and predators at every level of the food chain. How anything evolved to sentience there remained a mystery. "They're coming through now," his assistant chirped, mandibles clicking anxiously. The airlock hissed open, and 3 humans emerged. They moved with that characteristic predator's gait, balanced, efficient, aware. The lead human, Ambassador Chen, smiled widely, revealing her flat omnivore teeth. Vexthar suppressed a shudder. He had read that humans considered this expression friendly. "Ambassador Vexithar," Chen said warmly, extending her hand. "It's an honor." Vexithar tentatively touched her palm with his foreclaw, completing the bizarre human greeting ritual. Her grip was firm but not crushing, a measured application of force that spoke to remarkable control. The tour of the station proceeded smoothly until they reached the recreation sector. This was where Vexithar's carefully planned schedule encountered its first obstacle. Blocking the corridor entrance were 4 Krylax cubs, the offspring of the station's security chief. Krylax were formidable, 8-limbed, heavily armored with natural weapons that could shred titanium. Even their cubs stood waist-high to a human, with developing mandibles and razor-sharp ridges along their carapaces. They were play-fighting, as young predators do, completely oblivious to the diplomatic procession. Vexthar's translator clicked in distress. "Move along, younglings," he commanded in Krylax, but they ignored him, tumbling over each other in mock combat. Behind him, the other council representatives shifted nervously. A Vithian delegate actually retreated several steps. This was problematic. Krylax cubs were notoriously stubborn and, more importantly, dangerous when startled. Their play could turn aggressive in a microsecond. Station protocol dictated waiting for a parent or security team. Any sudden movement or loud noise might trigger their prey drive response. But Ambassador, Chen simply stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said calmly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, a specific tone and cadence that made Vexthar's instincts tingle. It was the sound of a pack leader, an alpha, something that transcended species. More remarkably, it was polite. The cubs froze mid-tumble, 4 sets of compound eyes fixed on the human. Then in perfect unison, they moved to the sides of the corridor and stood at attention, their small bodies rigid and alert. Like soldiers, Vexthar thought with amazement. Like disciplined soldiers responding to a superior officer. Chen smiled at them, that predator's display of teeth, and said, "Thank you very much." She walked through the corridor, her delegation following. As they passed, each cub remained motionless, tracking the humans with unwavering focus. Once the humans were through, the cubs returned to their play as if nothing had happened. Vexthar stood frozen, his translator unit struggling to process what he'd witnessed. His assistant beside him made a sound like clicking stones, the Zithian equivalent of shocked laughter. "How?" Vexthar finally managed. "What did she do?" The human security officer traveling with Chen's group, a tall man named Rodriguez, glanced back with an amused expression. "Ma'am used her teacher voice," he said simply. "Teacher voice?" "Yeah." Ambassador Chen taught high school for 15 years before joining the diplomatic corps. Teenagers, specifically. Rodriguez said this as if it explained everything. It didn't. Vexthar flagged this for later research. The rest of the tour proceeded without incident. But Vexthar couldn't stop thinking about the corridor. That evening, he accessed humanity's cultural database, the massive collection of information they'd provided upon first contact. What he found both fascinated and terrified him. Humans didn't just coexist with predators on their death world, they dominated them. They had domesticated wolves into dogs, turning apex predators into companions. They had tamed horses, cats, and countless other creatures. They had developed complex social hierarchies that allowed them to coordinate in groups of millions. But more than that, they had evolved something the galaxy had never seen, the ability to project authority across species barriers through mere vocalization and body language. Pack dynamics refined over millions of years, leadership that transcended words, and perhaps most remarkably, they wrapped this terrifying capability in politeness. "Excuse me," she had said. Not a command, not a threat, a request that somehow carried the weight of inevitability. Vexthar discovered something else in his research. Human teachers regularly manage groups of 30 or more adolescents, young humans in their most volatile developmental phase, in enclosed spaces, for hours at a time, using primarily vocal control and presence. This was considered an ordinary profession. The implications were staggering. The next day, during the formal council session, Vexthar observed Chen more carefully. She never raised her voice. She never made threats. Yet when she spoke, representatives from species that had dominated the galactic stage for millennia found themselves leaning forward, listening intently. When she suggested modifications to trade agreements, delegates who had planned to object found themselves nodding. When she proposed solutions to the Outer Rim disputes, skeptics became believers. Not through manipulation or coercion, but through that same calm, measured authority she'd displayed in the corridor. She was using her teacher voice on the entire council, Vexthar realized. And it was working. Later, as the human delegation prepared to depart, Vexthar approached Ambassador Chen privately. "The Cubs," he said. "That corridor. I've been researching your teaching profession." Chen smiled, though this time it seemed gentler. "And what did you learn, Ambassador?" "That humanity's most formidable ability may not be your endurance, your pack tactics, or your tool-using intelligence," Vexthar said slowly. "It's your capacity to establish order through respect rather than fear, to lead by presence rather than force." Chen considered this. "You know what we say on Earth, Ambassador? It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. But more than that, it's knowing when to fight and when a simple 'excuse me' will do." She extended her hand again, and this time Vexthar took it without hesitation. As her ship departed, Vexthar updated humanity's file in the Council database. Under Special Abilities, he added a new entry: Species-wide capacity for benevolent dominance. Approach with respect, not caution. They are predators who chose politeness as their preferred weapon. In the recreation sector, the Krylax cubs continued their play, but every time a human passed through, they moved aside without being asked, instinctively recognizing what the galaxy was only beginning to understand. When an apex predator says, "Excuse me," the wise response is to move like soldiers, because humanity had figured out something the rest of the galaxy hadn't. True power doesn't need to roar. Sometimes it just needs to politely clear its throat.